Welcome everyone to day 13 of Edpuzzle. If you remember last class, you made a prediction about the Tower of Babel, and after Machloket of Adam and Eve, and after the Machloket of Cain and Abel, and after the Machloket, and after the obedience of Noah and the flood, I asked you the question, what's going to happen with the Tower of Babel? Would this be a place of Machloket once again, or will this be a doubling down on obedience? And what I loved was everyone said, oh, judging from the story of the Tower of Babel, which I know of the people trying to build a tower, a giant tower, the people collecting in this place, it seems like there must be machloket here. So, and I think we all said in the class, machloket. But actually, I hope that what you may have seen from our study was that it really there sure there was machloket of like waging war against God, but that's not like I have a different idea of how or I don't like what's going on. It was more of a sense of like um this is what happens when people are completely obedient to one another, meaning this is what happens when there is no machloket. So I don't know, maybe it's not obedience saying like, God, whatever you say I will do, but it's a sense saying this is a world. If Noah was a world of no machloket, right? God, you said this, I'm going for it, I'm doing it, I'm doing it, not even questioning, not even bringing up, maybe something's wrong with this. The Tower of Babel is what happens when there is actually no disagreement whatsoever. People come together and work on a project, and inevitably, the Tower of Babel is saying that the Tower of that people, when they come together in this kind of way, it's actually not for good but for bad, and it's not actually how it's not something that actually God even wants. So like we did, like just to review for a second, we looked at the pre-tower story, the post-tower story, and the tower story itself, and we noticed that there are names in the pre-story, names in the post-story, and a lacking of names in the middle story. And and so it's strange, right? Precisely the place they're trying to build a name for themselves, and yet the Torah says this is a place where there are no names, meaning there's no individuality whatsoever. And I think David was the one who brought up in class, the more there is individuality, the more there is someone who says, this is who I am, this is what I believe in, this is my opinion, the more likely there is to be machloket. So the Tower of Babel story shows kind of, oh, this is what happens when there's no individuality, when no one is disagreeing, when everyone is kind of on the same page. And for some reason, God is saying, no, 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 no. That's not what I want. I want there to be something more like the pre-story, something more like the post-story. Um, and where did, by the way, I get these ideas about what the Tower of Babel represents? I wish I would love to say that, oh, I came up with them myself, but this is Rabbi Shai Held, and he's the Rosh Yeshiva at a place called Machon Hadar, which I hope you'll all, when you get kind of interested in your own pursuit of Judaism, that you'll look at this place because it is an amazing place of rigorous thinking about Judaism. And so he wrote a Devar Torah where he includes these ideas, and of course, he brings up one of my favorite people is and I'm trying to find the book. If I have it here, do I have it here? Do I have it here? Yep, I'm coming back. I don't see it here. But Judy Klister, which I think you'll see but so he uses Judy Klister's book, and he says the following, right? Strikingly, no names are mentioned in the story of Bavel. There are no names because there are no individuals. This is especially ironic and tragic in light of the people's expressed wish to make a name for themselves. So as we saw, we made a prediction of Tower of Babel is going to be a place of a lot of machloket, but now actually I think we can see that the Tower of Babel is actually a place of uber obedience, not obedience to God, but obedience to one another. So here's just the end of that story for a second. And God came down to look at the city and tower that man had built, and God said, if as one people with one language for all, this is how they may have begun to ask, then nothing that they may propose to do will be out of their reach. Let us then go down and mix up balal, their speech, so that they will not understand one another's speech. So, any questions? Give me two questions that you have from kind of reading this. And here are a couple questions of mine. So, okay, first of all, another quote from Shai Held, Dr. Rabbi Shai Held. What's so bad about human unity? Isn't it a worthy aspiration? A great deal depends on how we understand unity. If everyone speaks the same language and utilizes the same words, then perhaps by implication they think the same thoughts and hold the same sense of opinions. Perhaps then this story isn't really about unity, but about uniformity, which is much different. By the way, how is unity different from uniformity? Please answer that question. And then Rabbi Scheiheld says, an inevitable consequence of uniformity is anonymity. If everyone says the same words, thinks the same thoughts, then a society emerges in which there's no room for individual tastes, thoughts, and aspirations, or for individual projects and creativity. All difference is erased. So going back to the questions for God came down to look at the city, so God's logic is that this is an example that people can do anything they set their mind to. And it is all because they are acting as one people with one language. But isn't this a good thing? You can use kind of what Rabbi Shai Held just said to kind of help you answer that question. And why is God so scared that nothing will be out of their reach? Why does God want some things to be out of their reach? And if we remember, actually, the thing that actually God was scared about once the people ate from the tree of knowledge of good and evil wasn't that they ate from that tree. It was that actually there was another tree that was going to be within their reach, and God wanted to keep out of their reach. So here we have the sense again that God is trying to keep things, or is invested in keeping some things out of the reach of people. Why? Why does God want that? Why doesn't God want to say that actually people you can obtain anything you need, anything you want in life? Why is God saying there's some things that need to be out of reach? I'd love to hear your answer for that question. Okay, the end of our story. God scattered them from there over the face of the whole earth, and they stopped building the city. That is why it was called Babel, because there God mixed up Balal. That's like, so that kind of word looks a lot like Balal in Hebrew, the speech of the whole earth. And from there, God scattered them over the face of the whole earth. And of course, we say, like, when a baby says gibberish, they babble, right? They are babbling, and it comes from that Hebrew word. So you know a Hebrew word. How about that? Okay. So let me just see if there's okay. So and just a review of what we said in class, we asked the question: how can it be that the blessing of filling the earth and scattering that is given to Adam and Eve, and the blessing of filling the earth and scattering that is given to Noah actually becomes a curse for these people because they don't want to scatter and they don't want to fill the earth? And here is what here is what Dr. Rabbi Held has to say. God has made it clear that the divine vision is for humanity to spread out and fill the earth. Yet the builders want to stay put, to congregate in one place. In fact, their resistance to God's blessing is clear. They declare their intention to build their city and the tower within it out of a fear, perhaps lest we be scattered. We don't want to be scattered all over the world. And David brought this up in class. David said, "Wait a second. I thought the whole thing about scattering only came at the end. I didn't realize that actually the very reason why they're building this tower is because they don't want to be scattered," right? And that's so interesting, right? They do something so they don't want, and the punishment is exactly what they don't want to have happen. What they most fear is what God wants most. God's punishment then may not ultimately be a punishment at all, but rather a reaffirmation of the initial divine blessing. A reaffirmation of the initial divine blessing. What the story ends with then is not just judgment, but also and primarily an enforced return to the path of blessing. Can you just explain to me what's happening and what he's saying here? Reaffirmation means I am like doubling down upon. I am like re asking people to remember the initial divine blessings because they've kind of gone. Right, so explain that to me. I don't want to explain it for you, but you can explain it to me. All right, great. Let's move on, everyone. So, Why might God think? So we just saw then if actually even the Tower of Babel story is about saying God saying, you know what, all humanity has left the idea of what I really want for people. I want people to be scattered. Why is it such a blessing for people to be scattered? Why does God say, Adam and Eve, I want you to scatter. Noah, I want you to scatter. And then Tower of Babel, I don't want you all in one place. I want you to scatter. So, what is that all about? Why does God sense like actually that's a blessing for people to kind of fill the earth? So, give me a couple ideas about why that might be. And here's some things that last year's class, because I didn't teach this class last year, but I happened to teach another class called getting good at at reading the Torah slowly, right? Getting fast at reading the Torah slow. And we started from the beginning of the Torah and kind of got to the Abraham story, the binding of Isaac story, which we will actually get to in the next 2 or 3 weeks. But so it just so happens that I can use some of the material that we talked about in there. I'm not using all the material because we're specifically looking at one specific lens, one specific angle of all these stories. We're kind of looking at these stories and asking, what does God believe? Like, is machloket good? Like, is machloket there? Is machloket good thing or bad thing for God? And we're kind of trying to kind of get a sense of, does God like that there's machloket in the world? Does God create machloket in the world? What happens when there is machloket in the world and God reacts to it? And how does that reaction in some way show whether God likes machloket or not, right? That's kind of our larger question. And it just so happens we're using the first stories in the Torah to kind of get at that. And very soon, actually, right after the Binding of Isaac story, we're going to kind of leave the beginning stories and go to kind of two other stories in the Torah. So we're not going to be doing this forever, but we did the entire year, kind of from the beginning of the Torah until the Binding of Isaac. That was like their final exam, and we're going to get there next week. So we're going kind of in another direction from that class entirely. However, we did talk about the Tower of Babel, and we kind of asked the question, why might it be that God thinks it's a blessing? And here's kind of what they last year's class said. They said a scattered people is a different people. That kind of goes back to Dr. Held's idea about kind of individual tastes, thoughts, aspirations, individual project creativity, right? So there is difference there. Another idea is there are other ideas and perspectives when you have a scattered people. There's diversity, and then there's a possibility of other groups being created, and maybe one of these groups will actually be the Jewish group. In a sense, saying like, and I really that was an answer that really appealed to me because right up to now, God has tried to come to the entire world as a whole, and we'll now see a switch, and maybe God will switch to one person, to Abraham, very soon, and say kind of, I'm sticking with you, I'm sticking with your family. And maybe the scattering allows God a few different options of who God might choose. Like now that they're kind of dispersed, I say, let me look at this guy for a sec, let me look at this woman for a second, let me look at this family for a second. Oh yeah, I'm going to try to kind of come to that and kind of let my voice be known in the world through that one person. So of these four ideas, which one kind of appeals to you most of why God thinks it's a blessing to be scattered? My second question is, tell me the relationship between scatter and machloket. Tell me the relationship between the likelihood of machloket and a scattered people. Yeah. Okay. So as scattering goes up, what happens to machloket? As scattering goes down and unity is reached, what happens with machloket? Great. Let's move on. So now we have the story. Like, what would be the story of machloket up until now? Right. So now we have the Adam and Eve, Cain and Abel, Noah and the flood, and now we have kind of the Tower of Babel story, the story, and kind of the punishment. So you should be able to tell that story in about 4 or 5 sentences. And of course, now we move to Abraham. And of course, just like I asked you in the Tower of Babel story, I'd love you to make a prediction. What's going to happen here? Are we going to see that here is just one more case of obedience and God has actually kind of turned away from even this idea of machloket in the world? Or are we going to see that kind of the scattering has in some way produced more machloket, and actually God is in search of that more machloket, in some way expresses a like or desire, or God sees that machloket and expresses kind of an anger and kind of turns away and tries to find another people. All right, so give me your prediction there, and now let's move forward. All right, so we're up to the Avraham story. Of course, by the way, in the beginning, just to make sure everyone knows this, is that Abraham's name is Avram. Only later, when God's kind of like, I'm sticking with this person and I'm sticking with his wife, do we go ahead and actually see that God's name is kind of like within Avram, and so his name becomes Abraham. That hey being actually God's name. Okay. So God said to Abram, "Go for yourself, for your land. Go for yourself from your land, from your birthplace, from your father's house to the land that I will show you. I will make of you a great nation, and I will bless you. I will make your name great, and you shall be a blessing." Abram went forth. Any questions here that you have? Bring up those questions and give me one or two questions that you might have from reading this. And here's my question: in light of the Tower of Babel story, what might God want to know about Avram by giving Avram this test? There's a basic feeling in Jewish life, in Jewish lore, that God gives Abraham 10, right, 10 tests total. Okay, and this is kind of test number one. God says to Avram, go for yourself, from your land, from your birthplace, from your father's house to the land that I will show you. I will make of you a great nation, and I will bless you. I will make your name great, and you shall be a blessing. And Avram went forth. So in light of the Tower of Babel story, what might God want to know about Avram? Okay, and and by the way, just to kind of this is one of my favorite books by Jack Miles, an autobiography of God. Says the following: the Bible could have started right here. The narrative is a fresh beginning, and Avram never gives any indication that he's heard of Adam or Noah or of God's earlier words and deeds. Avram knows God only from what God says and does to Avram himself. Interesting enough, right? So why? So that this is question number two. Um, why doesn't the Torah begin with Avram? Why does it begin with the stuff beforehand? Give me your kind of sense of why that is. And by the way, in light back to this question here, in light of the Torah, the Tower of Babel story, what might God have wanted to know? And basically, when Abraham is saying go, when God says go for yourself from your land, from your place, he's basically saying, can you scatter, Avram? Can you leave from where you are? Like, can you leave your place of being and have a different perspective, have a new you, have a new. And so it's almost as if God is searching for someone who can scatter. Now, or is God, in a sense, looking, kind of saying, oh, look at all these people that scattered. Is this now kind of part of their DNA? Is this like in their blood now? Or are they just doing this because I kind of made them scatter? Is Avram, by definition, is he a scatterer? If I say go, scatter, will he scatter? Kind of interesting, huh? So there's kind of the connection between Tower of Babel. Okay, now let's just kind of go through kind of where we are in this, just so everyone's on the same page with where the story leads to. So God commands Avram to begin a journey of his own from Mesopotamia to Canaan. Um, If he does so, he has promised that his grandkids and great grandkids will become a great nation. Avram does not even hesitate. He willingly accepts his mission. Avram takes along his wife Sarai, not yet Sarah, but Sarai. Lot and other members of the house will go with him. Avram goes to Shechem, where God promises the land of Canaan to Avram's future children. There's a famine in the land. Avram goes down to Egypt with his wife. He's afraid he'll be killed when they find out that when people find out that Sarah's his wife. He asks her to tell everyone that she's his sister. Pharaoh takes her into his home. God sends plagues. Pharaoh releases her and sends them all away. Abram becomes wealthy in Egypt. You know, last year we talked a ton about this because it's a kind of a story that actually repeats itself 3 times in the Torah, and we're kind of asking why, but we're going to kind of actually skip over it right now. Avram moves from Egypt to the Negev desert. He becomes very wealthy. Lot becomes rich as well. The workers of both men start to fight with one another. Avram suggests that Lot and he separate. Avram gives Lot the choice of where he wants to be. Avram goes in the other direction. God promises that the land on which Avram stands will remain in Avram's family forever. God blesses Avram and tells him how large his people will be. God tells Abe to walk the entire land that will be his. 5 kings are starting to fight with each other. During the fight, Lot and his property is captured. Avram is told about this. He gathers helpers together and they attack. They save Lot and all of Lot's property. Do not bring any make any significance of the fact that I highlighted this. Sorry about that. But it's interesting. Melchizedek, a priest of God Most High, blesses Avram. Avram refuses any reward for his act. After the war, God promises Avram a son and tells about the time in the future when the Israelites will be slaves in Egypt for 400 years. And how they'll leave with great wealth and will come back to the land after that. Sarai cannot have a child, so she and Avram, her servant, gives Avram her servant Hagar, who have birth of a son, Yishmael. In a dream, Avram is told he and Sarai will have a child of their own. His name will now be Avram instead of Avram. Avram instead of Avram. His wife's name will now be Sarah instead of Sarai. All males in their community must be circumcised on the 8th day of their life. Avram now goes and circumcises himself at 99 and his son Ishmael at 13. 3 strangers journey past Avram's tent. They're invited in and treated really well. These strangers announce the birth in 1 year's time of the son of Abraham and Sarah. Sarah reacts with extreme disbelief. She laughs, but pretends that she doesn't. And that's really where we are in the story right now. And that brings us to kind of the great story of Sodom and Gomorrah. Let's just kind of start it out here. The men, angels, messengers, got up from where they were, where they looked down on the face of Sodom. Abraham was walking with them to send them off. And God said, should I cover up what I am doing from Abraham? Since Abraham is to become a great and populous nation, and all the nations on the earth will be blessed themselves through him, because I have known him in order that he will command his sons and his house that comes after him to guard the ways of God and do what is right and just. B, in order that God can bring upon Abraham what he said to him. So we are about to enter into one of the greatest stories of the Torah, the story of Sodom and Gomorrah and the destruction of that city. But this comes right before, and this is exactly what the Torah, and I just want to look at it for a second. And God says, should I cover up what I am doing from Abraham? First of all, who is God talking to here? Who is God talking to? Okay. And then, so we do know that maybe God's talking to the angels, maybe God's talking to God's self, but he's basically saying, and he's debating whether should I show Abraham what I'm about to do to Sodom and Gomorrah, or should I not? Now, I'm kind of thinking, meaning, should Abraham go to sleep and tomorrow wake up and Sodom and Gomorrah is destroyed? Or should I show him what I'm about to do? So why would God want to show Abraham what God is about to do? Right? That's a question. And here is the reason why. So we have this kind of debate going on in God's head. And then we know that God actually decides, yes, I'm going to show Abraham what I'm about to do before I do it. I'm not going to show it to him afterwards. He's not going to wake up in the morning and see a destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah, but I'm going to tell him what I'm about to do. And here's the reason why. Like as God is kind of weighing inside God's head what to do, God says, I'm going to do it for 2 reasons. I'm going to do it, 3 reasons really. I'm going to do it because A, Abraham's going to become a great and populous nation, and all of the nations of the earth will bless themselves through him. I'm not quite sure exactly what that means. Again, this is reason number 1. Reason number 1, I have to show Abraham what I'm doing to Sodom and Gomorrah because all the nations of the earth are going to find blessing through Abraham. Give me your best guess of what that actually means. I'm not quite sure. Okay? Number 2, here's another reason why I have to show Abraham what's happening in Sodom and Gomorrah. I have to show it to him so he will command his sons and his house that come after him to guard the ways of God and to do what is just and right. So again, how does showing what God is going to do to Sodom and Gomorrah show Avram's children, or make Abraham into a teacher of those children, right? God wants Abraham to be able to say to those children, I remember this time when God did da, ba, 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 ba. And this in some way is going to, this memory, and when I can teach you about it, is going to help you be more right and be more just. So what is that God wants Avram to teach his children and command them? Okay, next question. Next reason why. Um, in order, this is another reason. In order that God can bring upon Abraham what he said to him. Huh? I don't know what that means. I'm not even going to ask you about that, but that's another one. Okay, so here we go. And now we're getting to the story. God said, the cry of Sodom and Gomorrah, how great it is. This is God talking not to Avram. God is talking to probably God's self here. And their sin, how heavy it is. Okay? I am hearing a cry from Sodom and Gomorrah. That cry is great. That cry is coming from people who are suffering there, who are crying because they are mistreated there. And it's a great big cry. And this is kind of God's attention is on it. Okay, now these are some keywords here. Let me go down and I'll see if they've done everything like the cry that has come up to me. Okay, let's try to take this. Let me go down. This is God saying, I'm going to go down and I will see if they've done everything. First, like the cry that has come up to me. So let's just take this. The cry that has come up to me. Who's doing the crying? Who's doing crying in a city that will cause God to kind of say, oh, that city is bad? Who's doing that crying? Okay. And now God is seeing if they've done everything like the cry has come up. So that cry has said something to God. What is like, if you were to put words to that cry, what is that cry? What are the words to that cry? And now God is going down to see if they have done things like those cries have said. So the cries are coming from one people, and the they that God is talking about are another. Who's the they? Okay? Right. So I hope you understood that the they are the people of Sodom and Gomorrah. The cries of the people who are being mistreated at Sodom and Gomorrah. So God is saying, let me go down and I'll see if they, the people of Sodom and Gomorrah, are actually as bad as the cry is saying they are. Okay? And if not, I will know. What does that mean? And if not, meaning I'll see if they've done everything that the cry that's come to me. And if not, and if they have not, if those people in Sodom and Gomorrah have not done the stuff that's bad as the cry, what is God going to know? God's going to know that that city is actually not really so bad after all. And God's probably not going to destroy that city. But if yes, then what is God going to do? Okay, so this is really, really interesting, right? So God, even before the entire Sodom and Gomorrah story is shown to Abraham, the first thing that God is doing is what? Right? God is actually checking to see if what? And now what I'd like you to do is rewrite God's words using the words guilty and innocent in your rewrite, just to make it much, much clearer, right? By the way, this is not something that I learned for a long, long, long time. And a lot of my understanding comes from a guy named Rabbi Reuven Kimmelman about this story. And I find it amazing, right? And I think that he's absolutely correct in the way he understands it. Oh, and here is Reuven Kimmelman right here. Right here. And this is what Reuven Kimmelman says. The verse 20 goes to establish the horribleness of the crime. The question is only whether, so the horribleness of the crime, right? Verse 20, God said, the cry of Sodom and Gomorrah, how great it is, right? God is saying, wow, people are really being mistreated and misused. The question is only whether all of Sodom are guilty. To make sure, God goes down to check whether they've acted altogether according to the severity of the report, right? Let me go down and I'll see if they've done everything like the report, like the cry that has come to me, right? If they have not, then God would take note and would make the requisite distinction. What does that mean? If they have not, then God would take note and say, oh, actually, the city's not so bad after all. the city doesn't need to be destroyed. Or, oh, there are a few righteous people in the city, I'll save them and I'll destroy everything else. Since we learn that God is bent on destroying the whole city, it can be assumed that there's no basis for for finding the righteous people and saving them, and that though the punishment was collective, the judgment was individual. That's a little hard. I'm not gonna go into that. But um, according to Kimmelman, let's see if we can answer these questions. The words "Let me go down, and I'll see if they've done everything like the cry that has come up to me." What does that actually mean? According to Kimmelman, the words "and if not, I will know," right, from this right here, "and if not, I will know," right here. So according to Kimmelman, the words "and if not, I will know" means what? A, if they are not, what? And if not, I will know not to do what? So try to answer those questions. Third question. From the fact that God continues to want to punish the city, what do we understand to be the result of God's investigation of Sodom and Gomorrah? Has God found anyone in the city that is good? Okay, so these are important. So, and kind of right before we end today, this is what I'd like you to be able to answer. At this moment in time, right? So now we see at the end. So let me go down and I'll see what they've done. If everything like the cry that has come to me, and if not, I will know. And the people, men, messengers, angels, turned from there and went to Sodom. But Abraham was still standing before God. So Abraham is standing before God during all of this stuff that's happening. God has not yet shown Sodom and Gomorrah and what he's going to do to Sodom and Gomorrah, to Abraham. But Abraham's standing there because he accompanied the messengers that had just come to tell Sarah that she's going to have a baby. So at this moment in time, what does God, at the end of this, right, when Abraham's standing before God, what does God and the reader now know about the character of Sodom and Gomorrah? And at this moment in time, what does Abraham know about the character of Sodom and Gomorrah? Okay, and let's just read what Rabbi Kimmelman has to say at the end. Since Abraham charges God with seeking, oh well, no, okay, no, we're not gonna read this part here. Okay, um, okay, okay. So we're gonna stop actually right here. Sorry. So right. So at this moment in time, just answering this final question. All right. That's it for today. We'll see you in class. Bye.